going to show you the components of a canvas so that you can decide what stitches are going to be best for your project and give you a little tutorial on how to do some of them. So most canvases are either 13 mesh or 18 mesh in needlepoint these days. This is a 13 mesh, which means it takes 13 intersections to create 1 inch. Both size canvases, whether it's 13 or 18, will have a interlocking canvas. The most common type of canvas used in needlepoint these days is Zweigart Mono Deluxe interlocking canvas. This comes in both 13 and 18 mesh sizes, as well as a variety of others, but those are the two that are most commonly used in needlepoint. So this is a 13 mesh canvas. And as you can see, this canvas is interlocking. So there are times where the canvas is vertical, and then there are other times where it is horizontal. So this is important to know for a stitch like basket weave because it's done diagonally. It's a diagonal stitch, and how you proceed is by knowing if you're on a vertical or a horizontal intersection. So when I start a stitch, I typically start in the upper right-hand corner. So my first stitch here is a vertical stitch. In needlepoint, we like to call that pulls. If you are on a horizontal stitch like this one here, that is a step. So in basket weave, you typically like to go up the steps and then down the pulls. When you're stitching, you're going from Mexico to Maine. So what that means is when you're pulling your thread up through the hole, you are going from Mexico, so the southernmost region here, to Maine, which would be going across and diagonally up. So I like to think of that as Mexico to Maine. So to start, what you can either do is you can create a waist knot or just hold onto your tail and bury it as you go. So to start, I'm going to show you how to bury your tail. This is the common way that I like to do it. Some people do it this way, some people do waist knots. It's just kind of personal preference, and you can decide what works best for you. So what you're going to do is we're going to come up in our first stitch hole, pull that through. You're going to leave about, a 1 inch tail. I hold that tight, and I know that I'm going to be stitching in this direction, so I will be going over this and locking it in. So coming up in Mexico, then going down via Maine, and there's my first stitch. So in basket weave, what you need to pay attention to is the fact that what would be your next diagonal stitch. So for here, these are horizontal intersections, so we're going to go up our steps. So in this situation, we would go down 1 stitch and then up Mexico to Maine. Then we come up here, we're going diagonally again, and going up our steps to the next intersection. So now we're always going to go diagonal, so we're going to go over 1, which means this is our next intersection here. So we'll go down this pole. So we'll go into that hole, and we go down through all of these 3 here because it will kind of weave in between. So Mexico to Maine, then diagonally down, going down the pole, and that is the end of that diagonal row. So that brings us back to our steps. So we will go up the steps here. So we'll start down here. And then that finishes that diagonal row. For our next diagonal row, we have our pole. As you can see, it's a vertical intersection. And we're gonna go Mexico to Maine and down the pole. Now, it's important to note that, in this situation, my steps were my first diagonal row. If, for instance, my initial stitch had been on a step, then this would have been a pole. So you would have started up here instead, and I can show you that in a second. So, okay, so let's say your first intersection here wasn't up there. Let's say instead it was here and it's starting on a step. So it would be the same principle for starting. Your first stitch would be here, but because your next diagonal row are poles, instead of going down like we did earlier, you would go over and start by going down the pole that way. I know when I first started stitching, that took me a moment to understand because that was confusing. Basket weave is a great stitch, and I would say that most Americans do it. I've heard that it is not as common in Europe and other places for stitching, but as Americans, we love this stitch. It has great coverage, and it's really just a beautiful stitch overall to do, but it can take a moment to understand it. So we just finished going up the steps here, and then we go down the poles as one does, like firemen. Oopsies, we got a little knot. Then we go up our steps. So, as you can see, it's the same stitch, but it just depended on where we were starting. So let's keep going. We're gonna go down our pole. So if you were to then, let's say, get to the end of your section, end of your thread, and you needed to close off your thread here, how it should look in the back is like a basket. You can kind of see. And it's intuitive to think that you would lock your tail vertical, like kind of following the direction of the stitch, but you don't want to do that. If you do that, you will potentially see your thread on the other side and it'll kind of look like a little worm in the canvas. So what you're going to do instead is you will go either on the horizontal or the vertical and follow those stitches to lock it off. And that is how you do basket weave.